He leads the company that operates 4 of the most popular cable channels for women, producing a wealth of content distributed around the world. After helping to create MSNBC and CNBC, David Zaslav took the helm at Discovery in 2007, where he moved quickly to streamline the company and relaunch channels so he could take it public, all within the span of a year. Since then, Discovery's market cap has quadrupled. And now, Discovery is coming to terms with a new world, one where viewers increasingly turn to streaming services for their programming and are moving away from Discovery's core business of traditional cable channels, leading Zaslav to make the biggest deal of his life, betting once again on content. On this edition of Bloomberg Big Decisions, David Zaslav. David Zaslav, thank you for joining us. Great to have you.
Great to see you.
So you've just completed the biggest deal of your career, I believe, $12 billion for Scripps. Why did you do it?
Well, it's interesting. There's a financial reason, and there's also a strategic drive that we think could really work for us. Here, we're in the cable and free-to-air business. Scripps is in the cable and free-to-air business. And so we both do the same thing. It's what we do for a living. It's what we know how to do. It's what we do every day when we come to work. And so we feel that we're quite comfortable in putting these two companies together. And the synergy gives us the opportunity to, we think, have a target of doubling our free cash flow. So we generate about $1.4 billion in free cash flow. Scripps generates about $8 billion. And we think we can get to 2, 8, or 3 through revenue synergies by coming up with a lot of cost synergy, mostly cost synergy. And so in a turbulent time, if we can emerge with almost $3 billion of cash, it creates like a moat in a turbulent time. We're different than most media companies in the world, and there are a lot of great companies. But whether it's Disney or whether it's Rupert or Comcast, NBC, CBS, they're mostly in the scripted and movie business. Netflix, Amazon, that whole side of the business is focusing on, as if it was a soccer field, the ball is scripted series and scripted movies. So it's very crowded, it's getting very disrupted, and the number of scripted series have gone from 200 to over 500. And Apple and Amazon and Netflix alone are spending almost $20 billion on top of these companies. So we look at that and we say that we're not that. Well, we're on the other side of the business. The other side of the business is we own all of our content. It's real life entertainment. We see ourselves as a global IP company, whether it's with Oprah, with Discovery, with Animal Planet, with ID and crime or science or cars. And with Scripps having food and HG and cooking and travel, we put it all together now and we're on a different area of the field. And so we say very good luck to them. I think there's a lot of great companies. It's going to be very disrupted. And our game is to take those great brands around the world. And as people over the next few years look to pull content onto devices and phones, we think the functional value of food, home, cooking, science, cars, that we'll do better, or we have a chance to do better, than if somebody was going to pay to watch The Crown on a mobile phone. So a lot of it is about owning IP and figuring out a way to get to mobile where people will pull your content.
Well, let's talk about getting to mobile, because that's the big disruption everybody in media is talking about as a practical matter. How will this help you get to scale, as it were?
Well, we're about 20% of the viewership in the U.S. at any given time. And we have 4 of the top 6 or 7 cable channels for women with HG, Food, ID, TLC, and then we have OWN that's #1 for African American women. So I think we have a great menu to offer to an advertiser. Discovery is in 220 countries. We have an average of 10 channels in every country in the world. So we're kind of a factory machine of driving IP all around the world. And so we could do what very few media companies could do. We could do a global offering of food. We could do a global offering of all of our content.
In this new world of streaming, will viewers be watching for platforms like HGTV or Discovery, or will they be looking for programs like The Crown, like Game of Thrones?
Well, it's hard to tell behaviorally exactly what people are going to do. But by doing this deal and generating free cash flow and taking a look at the assets that we have, by owning science globally, by owning every piece of IP that we own effectively, except for sports, we're long IP. We've spent a lot of money to own it on all platforms. And that gives us the opportunity. If Amazon said, I'd like to do an offering globally, the only other media company that could do that would be Disney, and it would be in the kids space. And so we would raise our hand and say, terrific, we have a great family offering. And so for us, it's about the long tail. And we think in the end, people that love food are going to pull it. We're not sure exactly how it's going to work, but we think the fact that we own all of our content and we have passionate viewers that they love us like they love a sports team. They'll come home and they put on HG all day long, or they'll put on food. And so we have a sustainable growth business with our synergy. And then we have all this IP that we could take direct to consumer, and we've started to do it.
Can you win in streaming without going through the bundlers? I mean, do you have to be on Hulu? Do you have to be on YouTube? Or can you do it directly? Is your product strong enough?
We don't know. Everywhere else in the world, we're on almost every skinny bundle. Here in the US, we're in most of them. We're not on Hulu, and we're not on YouTube, but we're on most of the others. And people love our channels. And so, one, we think that over time we'll get on those skinny bundles. We hope to. We'd like to partner with our distributors because they helped us build our business. And in many cases we are. We're partnering with AT&T on DirecTV Now. We partner with Brian on Comcast on his offerings, with Charter. So that's the best way to do it, kind of regionally. But there is an opportunity for us to go direct to consumer ourselves, which we're already doing in a number of areas, in cars and in sports. But we could also go to those big companies. If you take a look at what NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox spent 3 years ago, and how much is being spent by Amazon, Netflix, Apple, and Google, there's a massive amount of share shift that's going on there. And these are real global companies, the likes of which we've never seen before. So if any one of those companies wanted to offer for $5.99 a compelling family-friendly service, we would either be most of it, we would argue we'd like to be most of it, or we could be all of it and see how it goes. Because anywhere you go in the world and you say Discovery or Animal Planet or ID or Oprah, people know our brands and they value them.
How will you make that decision about whether you go direct to consumer or you go through middlemen, essentially? How do you make that decision as CEO?
Well, look, right now it's not a fair fight because the direct-to-consumer businesses, the Netflix, the Amazons, we in media used to trade at about a 14 multiple because the view was that this great dual revenue stream cable and free-to-air business would go on forever. And the view now is that it's getting disrupted by some of these direct-to-consumer platforms that are global. There's a question of who's going to emerge and be the winner. We think, looking now, it's only the second or third inning, but we've carved out a very compelling spot of quality brands that people love, that we can offer globally, and we could offer them ourselves.
You stepped up big time on sports. That was a variation from what people had expected from you. Why does that make sense for you? You talk about disruption in media. There was a time not too long ago when you were the disruptor in chief, in some sense. I watched you from Capital Cities ABC across the street as you created MSNBC and NBC. You created CNBC. How does this compare with that disruption when you disrupted broadcast? Basic cable came in and really disrupted it. How does it compare? What did you learn from that experience you can apply now?
Patience. In that case, Jack Welch and Bob Wright were committed to try and take the broadcast business into cable. For people that were around at that time, it was pretty unusual. And it's important because the business that you think you're going to launch that's going to work is never the business that works. The audience is always going to tell you what they get nourished by. And that's what our business is about. That's what most businesses are about. When we launched with Oprah, the Oprah Winfrey Network, we had a dream, Oprah and I, that it was going to be about living your best life. And we looked strategically at the space and said, we can do this. But when we went out with the content, Super Soul Sunday worked terrific, but a lot of the other stuff was too earnest and the audience went away. And we had to figure out, what are they going to come back for? And it took us a lot of years, but we started to listen, what do you like? That's what our business is about. We don't want everyone to watch, but the Oprah Winfrey Network now is the #1 network for African American women. So for us now, we've broken our company in half, essentially. We got half the company that's about growing our channels, doing what we believe we can do as well or better than anyone in the world. Then there's a whole group that has to figure out, okay, how do I get over the top? What do people want when they consume content over the top, you know? And I think you have to be willing to recognize failure and use it kind of optimistically. Good, we know that now.
And you can do it without the blockbusters.
The way people watch our channels, they don't. It is hit driven if you're a broadcast network. The way people watch our channels, they come home and HG gets me. Discovery is my channel. TLC in Middle America is the channel that I love. I love Oprah. That's the channel that I watch. That's how they curate. Where do I get nourished? That's the business that we're in. We think that's going to be sustainable, and we think that ultimately they could either pull one of those really big, expensive platforms, or when they're looking to pull something that they want that's family friendly, with brands they know, characters they know, everywhere in the world, for a lot less than they would have to pay for that, we look different. And we got to, over time, we'll see if it's an aggregated offering, if it's an individual offering, but I think we got a game. But the first thing we got to do is execute on this.
You stepped up big time on sports. That was a variation from what people had expected from you. Why does that make sense for you?
Well, first, we're in every country. So when I say we're in every country, we have a sales team, we have a distribution team, we have creative people, we have marketing people, and we have strategic people. So we kind of know each country. And so when we looked at sports, Eurosport was not being individually fed into every country across Europe. So when we bought Eurosport several years ago, we looked and said, we can use our sales infrastructure. We could use our distribution infrastructure to drive more carriage. We could use our sales and marketing people. And it was a little bit of a leap, but it was driven by the idea that content used to be about getting inside of the television box, that rectangle. And even if you had content that was just okay, second or third choice, you did okay. When we launched our direct-to-consumer sports player 3 years ago in Europe, so we reach across 750 million people in Europe. We have the tennis, we have the cycling, we have the winter sports, we have summer sports, we have the Olympics. So we figured we have a great offering. 750 million people, $8, we should be able to do terrific. And we wrote 10 things that we thought we knew for sure. 8 of them were wrong. And the users told us. They said, okay, you know, we tuned in for the French Open, but we didn't want to watch Tour de France. We love tennis. Or they told us that maybe the most interesting takeaway that we applied to the Olympics is that when people consume content on a device, they expect to hit the device when they get up in the morning and see content. And then they expect a few hours later to hit that device. You need to multiple publish. So if speed skating is starting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the people that love speed skating have to get up in the morning and see a 1-minute video or 2 1-minute videos or some information about, and we downloaded 700 pieces of short form content in 21 languages every day to our Olympic player. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to aggregate about 500,000 subscribers. They love the sports IP, but they really, when people look at content on a device, they expect to be entertained and nourished whenever they hit it. And if you hit it and nothing is new, you're disappointed.
Can you do that and not step up into the really high-priced sports projects? Because that, to some extent, sounds a little bit like ESPN in the United States in the early days. They had lesser sports, and then they had to get in the NFL, they had to get in the NBA, and that, as you know, costs enormous amounts of money. Can you have a strategy that stops short of that?
Well, opportunistically, we have taken football. But we haven't taken football where we get in a bidding war with anyone. If you want to offer your content on a pan-European basis, there's only one place to do it, us. Or if you're a federation, if you're the Speed Skating Federation, you could sell it in every country. And the difference between the U.S. and Europe is in the U.S., it's one culture, one language, and everybody likes the same 4 sports, essentially. 90% of viewing, 80% of viewing is football, baseball, basketball, hockey. In Europe, there's a lot of sports that are number 1 in Northern Europe that are number 10 in Southern Europe. And if you're a federation, we're the one stop. And we've been very effective about getting a lot of content. And all the sports content we have with Eurosport, we've, as much as we can, we've gotten it long term, and we own it on all platforms.
You have Scripps, as you say, you need to execute on that now. But is that enough for Discovery? Are you on the outlook for further acquisitions?
This is news, but not as you know it. This is TikTok by Bloomberg, the first and only global news network built for Twitter. 24/7 news streaming live on Twitter.
You have Scripps, as you say, you need to execute on that now. But is that enough for Discovery? Are you on the outlook for further acquisitions? Do you need to get bigger scale?
Well, look, as I said earlier, we're in a different place of the soccer field than everyone else. So we think if we could execute on this, own all those passion brands globally. Scripps never took food and HG and cooking and travel around the world. So we have an opportunity to take all that IP, we'll convert it into 48 languages, and we'll start to spread it around. So that'll be a revenue synergy if viewership increases, and we think it will. In Latin America, we've bought some of their content. But I like our hand here. We got some work to do. We got to pay down some debt. We got to prove out that we're going to generate that free cash flow and that we really did build a moat. But at the same time, we're going to be working really hard about learning how consumers consume content on devices. And we're talking to every distributor, because we're better off if somebody that's already in business with you and you're already paying a $100 bill can then have a chance to check a box and pick us. Today in the U.S., there's probably 25 or 30 million subscribers that are broadband only. The one service that's being marketed to them heavily is Netflix. And the industry built us, we built them, and together I think we're going to come up with something that's going to be pretty compelling in terms of a skinny bundle, because it's not sensible to have Netflix have all that field without us on it.
You said you need to pay down some debt because you do have more debt on your balance sheet than a lot of other media companies do. You said you're going to save $350 million a year on Scripps. How are you going to do that? That's a lot of money, as you and I both know, to save in an operation.
Well, look, as we've looked at putting these businesses together, and it's early days, it's only been 5 weeks, but we've been working on it very hard for 6 months going up to it. We think that's rather conservative. These are 1-over-1 companies. We have 12 channels in the U.S., they have 6. So we're in the same business. We have 220 research people, they have 140 research people. We have 650 salespeople, they have 550 salespeople. And their people are really good. We put some of their people in charge in our new structure. And the idea is, who are the best and the brightest? Because when we looked at it, we said when it comes to nonfiction, who are the best 2 producers of nonfiction content, and who is best at monetizing it? And we looked and we said, in some areas they're better than us, in some areas we're better than them. We put these 2 together, and we will spend $3.5 billion on content, maybe growing to more than that. This is a hard business. We're in the business of creating stories and characters and getting people to turn on their TV and love it.
You've referred a couple of times to John Malone, who's a shareholder, doesn't control your company by any means, but you know him well. What is it like to have John Malone as somebody you can call up and say, should we do this, should we do that? What do you think about what's going on?
Well, I think about my last 30 years in this business, and it's sort of like what you want for your children. You are who you hang out with. And it really helps define you, the narratives that you hear, the questions that you hear. And so I look back over the last 30 years and 15 years listening to why Jack didn't want to do an acquisition that we brought him, or what we need to do with cable, how we need to do it. Bob Wright, one of the most successful guys running NBC, the Newhouse family, Donald and Cy Newhouse, and Bob Myron, who's a genius and has been in the cable business and built Bright House, and John Malone. And so when I think about where people should be spending their time, yes, you'd like to get the right job. Yes, you'd like to think that you're going to make some money. But I took a 50% pay cut to go to NBC from a law firm because I thought I can get to hang out with the guys at the Peacock, and maybe someday I'll get to meet Jack. And a lot of the way I see the world, I still talk to Jack all the time. So I'm hearing Jack's voice, I'm hearing Bob Myron and Donald Newhouse's voice, and I'm hearing John's voice. And so for that alone, I'm one of the luckiest guys.
It strikes me that you're now running Discovery, which really appeals in the United States to a lot of the middle of the country. People that the President of the United States probably wouldn't object to. In fact, I understand the President of the United States is a fan of Shark Week. Actually, I read that someplace.
I hope he's a fan of a lot of our stuff. I think, I hope.
You helped create MSNBC. That is a channel in a very different place. What do you think about the media landscape today in the United States in terms of politics? Because it seems to become much more polarized.
Well, I can just say that the business changed. When we launched MSNBC, Brokaw and I and Andy Lack and Tom Rogers, there was a group of us, and Jack said, we're going to launch the best news network in America, and we're going to use the #1 news division in the world to do it. We had this amazing library. We structured a deal with Microsoft to get them in. They wanted the library at the time, and that was our ambition. I'm not going to game out the different news networks in America, but we have to be practical and recognize that at least some of them are following that model, because you on the one hand you want to do the best journalism possible. On the other hand, you want people to watch you, and you want them to watch you for as long as possible. And part of the way we as human beings determine our success is, are we in third place? Are we in second place? How many people are watching us? How many people love us? And so I think that's the journey. And luckily, I'm not going to be one of the guys to figure that out.
Well, but let's talk about how you keep score. That leads us exactly to a great conclusion here. How do you keep score? I mean, I see that now you've jumped up in the rankings, actually, including broadcast and cable. Big step up with Scripps. Is that the way you keep score? Is that how you just tell whether you, David Zaslav, are succeeding?
No, because there's lots of books that have been written about, more scale tips you over. So we're staying in our lane. And what's going to be successful for us, and we've made this decision. On every one of our channels, we've said, if you don't love us, if you're not one of the passionate viewers that loves survival, if you're not one of the people that love science or that love crime, go find some other channels that you love. When we're creating content for our channels, we want global audiences that really affiliate and have a passion for our characters and our message. And a big piece of that is we're not going for the best rating. We're going for the most potent audience that says, they get me. When I go there, I see something that I love. And if we put something on any of these channels that looks like we're going for ratings, they'll immediately say, what's this doing on here? And so they're quite clever, and you just got to continue. This is what we do for a living. Figure them out on TV and try and figure them out in terms of the devices as to what they're going to love and what they're going to pay for.
David Zaslav, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thanks, David. Good to see you.